This is part 2 of a series on building a full stack web application using Spring Boot and React, where you get to watch every line of code being written and a full app built from the scratch, step by step. If you're new, start watching from this video. All right, so we're going to start building our Spring Boot kind of mid-layer / backend layer. And you can start a Spring Boot app using start.spring.io. I'm just going to do this in Visual Studio Code and try coding it in VS Code. And for those of you who are upset that I'm not using IntelliJ or Eclipse, I know you're out there because I get those comments. The IDE really doesn't matter, okay? You can pick whatever IDE you want and still follow along. I just happen to keep changing the IDE that I use for whatever reason. It really shouldn't matter, okay? When you're building a Spring Boot app, all you're doing is running a Java file, okay? You're just running that main Java file and that is it, really. So the IDE really shouldn't matter, okay? You can follow along with any IDE you like. Or if you want to follow along with VS Code, I have a couple of extensions that I've installed. Okay, I have the Java extension pack, which allows me to get access to the Java language server, which allows me to do autocomplete in Java and all that stuff. That's what makes VS Code a Java IDE-ish kind of a thing because of this extension pack. And then the other thing I've installed is the Spring Boot extension pack, which allows me to create a new Spring Boot application directly from VS Code, which is why I have this here. Okay, so make sure you have those two installed if you are choosing to build this in VS Code. If you're using another IDE, well, make sure you have a Java IDE so that you don't have to install those extensions for it. Yeah, either way, the extensions, the IDE itself really doesn't matter. Okay, so I'm going to create a new Spring Boot project, and I do that by using the command palette. And then I'm going to type Spring Initializer. Okay, there is this option here called Spring Initializer, create a Maven project, which is what I need. Okay, I'm going to click that. I choose the Spring version. This should be familiar if you've been building Spring Boot applications. Is basically going through the questions that would be asked if you were to go to start.spring.io. Okay, it's the same thing. You're just answering them in a wizard-like way. All right, so I'm going to choose a Java project and group. And then I'm going to call this IPL Dashboard. Okay, and jar, Java 16, Java version 16. And now here I get to choose the dependencies that I need, all right? So I'm gonna go with DevTools, which is essential. So basically you go to this thing and then hit enter, right? So I need Spring Web. So I'm gonna go to Spring Web and hit enter. I would say, see, it's selected these two dependencies and then I can add more, okay? So what else do I need? I'm gonna need a database. So I'm gonna choose HSQL, Hyper SQL database. All right, I'm going to use that. And I'm thinking I'll use Spring Batch because I'm going to use Spring Batch to parse the CSV file and get the data and then save it to the database. Okay, so I'm going to choose Spring Batch as a dependency. And then, of course, I need JPA because I need to save it to the database, right? I'm going to use JPA for holding on to entities and use entities instead of making JDBC calls directly when I'm serving an API. Okay, so we have this stuff. Do I need anything else? I can't think of anything, so I'm just going to continue. All right. So I'm going to say selected 5 dependencies, press enter to continue. I'm going to press enter. And now it is going to open up a window and say, okay, now where do you want to save this? All right, so I'm going to go to my C drive, create a folder called code. And in this, I'm going to say generate into this folder. Okay, so it's going to save this into this folder. Then it says, well, successfully generated. Do you want me to open this? I'm going to say, okay, open. And it is going to open a VS Code window with this project. A couple of questions. The workspace contains Java projects. Would you like to import them? Yes, please import the Java projects. There is a Maven wrapper. As with all Spring Boot projects, there is a mvenw.command or mvenw.sh file. It's basically a Maven wrapper in case you don't have Maven with you in your system. It's basically asking, do you trust it? Well, yeah, I trust it. I got this from Spring Initializer, so I kind of trust it. So here is my project, okay? And this should be familiar. There'll be one main app class, which is going to contain a main method, and this is going to bootstrap and kickstart your Spring Boot application. Okay, so I can basically click run here, and it is going to start my Spring Boot project, and it is going to make it available at localhost colon 8080. Okay, so now I should be able to access this web page. Localhost colon 8080. Well, you get the Spring Boot error because we don't have a controller. So this is all good for now. Okay, so as you can see, we have a Spring Boot app, which basically does nothing. And we are going to start with initializing the database. Okay, so what I want to do is when this application starts up, I want the app to take the CSV file and insert all the records into the database. All right, so I'm going to put the CSV file that I downloaded over here. Okay, this CSV file that I downloaded, I'm going to save this as in my C drive code. I'm going to put this in source main resources folder. Okay, I'm going to call this match data. Okay, so now over here there is a match data.csv. It's just a CSV file, right? It's just comma separated. There's nothing fancy happening over here. So this CSV file is over here. Now what I want to do is I want this application, when it starts up, it is going to look at this resources folder, find the CSV file, and it is going to take each of these entries and populate the data in the in-memory database, right? Now I've started with this thing. It has an in-memory database, so it's going to populate that. And once it's populated, we have the application server, the web application server, which is running, and I can have APIs which is going to look at this data and serve it to us. Okay, so I can have APIs which is going to leverage the data that is populated over there. So now what I need to do is write the code which is going to take the CSV file when the app starts up. Write the code which is going to take that CSV file and populate it to the database. Now that we have a Spring Boot project and the CSV file that the Spring Boot app needs to load to the in-memory database when it starts up, we have to figure out how to load it. Okay, and there is a way to do that using Spring Batch. So I'm just gonna, like with anything, you don't know, just Google it, right? So Spring Batch load CSV file. All right, so there should be, there's actually a Spring.io guide, which is perfect, right? So this is from the official source. I got this from the Spring.io website. It's basically a guide which walks through the process of creating a basic batch-driven solution. You'll be building a service that imports data from a CSV spreadsheet, transforms it with custom code, and stores the final results in a database. This seems perfect for what we're trying to do. So let's actually do this. Okay, so we have business data. Typically a customer business analyst supplies a spreadsheet, and it's in source main resources, which is perfect. Source main resources is where you put your non-Java files, but if you still want it to be in the class path, source main resources is a great place to put it because source main Java and source main resources are both in the class path in a Maven project. You want to put something in the class path and it's not Java code, put it in source main resources. Okay, so we have let's see, we have a SQL script to create a table to store the data. Okay, so first thing they do is create the SQL to create tables for the embedded database. Okay, I feel like I might be able to skip this because we have JPA, right? We're going to create an entity, and that might just create the table for us. Okay, so let's see. This is just the Maven part. We have create a business class. Okay, so this is the entity. Okay, so here's the entity. We're creating a business class which is going to hold on to each row in that CSV file. Okay, in our case, the CSV file is a match, right? Each match here needs to be an entity. All right, we're going to do that. We're going to create a class called match. Once you have a class called match, we take it to the processor, right? We're going to have a processor which processes each match. Okay, before you see me go through all the steps in creating and setting up a Spring Batch job, I want to give you an outline of how this works so that you have like a big picture idea of what's going on as you see me go through these steps, okay? Okay, so with the Spring Batch job, there are a bunch of things that you're going to have to do. Okay, so there are a bunch of constructs that you need to understand. So basically, you set up a job, which is a thing. Okay, you have a job. It's called a user job, which you set up with Spring Batch, and each user job is made up of a bunch of steps. Okay, you have step 1, step 2, and so on. Okay, so a job is made up of steps, and each step is made up of 3 phases. Okay, each step can be broken down into an reader, an input, which is a reader. Okay, and you have a processor, which is what takes the data and then processes it. And then you have a writer, which is what writes the processed data somewhere. Okay, so this is basically the whole concept behind Spring Batch. Okay, you have every step is going to have a reader, a processor, and a writer. Okay, in our case, where we are importing data from a CSV file to the database, we only need one step. Okay, that step is basically going to run through for each line in that CSV file, and it's going to import it. Right, so there's not going to be a step 2 in our case. And then in our case, the reader is going to read data from a CSV file. Okay, you're going to have a reader which reads data from a CSV file. The processor, which basically does the processing, right? It might change some data. It might make things kind of fit to the way we want it. And then the writer is basically the thing that writes to the database. Okay, so I just want to give you this high level idea so that you know what's going on when I'm following all the steps in the guide. First, I'm going to create a processor, then I'm going to create a reader, then I'm going to create a writer, and then I'm going to create a user job with one step, which is comprised of these 3 things: the reader, processor, and writer. These are the essential things that are required for setting up a Spring Batch. Okay, I also want to highlight that this is not necessary. You can create some arbitrary code which copies data from CSV and puts it into a database. Well, that works fine, but I want to kind of use this as an opportunity for learning and do this using Spring Batch. It's a really good use case for using Spring Batch. It's just an opportunity for us to learn. So with that context set, let's proceed with the tutorial. So let's start with the entity. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file called match. I'm going to call it match input.java because this is going to be the input value that we have, right? So this is going to correspond to each row in the CSV file. Okay, and let me actually put it in the .data package. Okay, move to package.data. And now here I need a bunch of, member variables to hold each of these things. Okay, so I'm going to copy these stuff. Each one of these is going to be a member variable. So I'm going to select all the commas so that I have separation over here. And then now I have all of these member variables over here. Now I need to create declarations for the stuff. I'm going to say private. All of them are going to be string. Okay, because we don't know what the data type is and we don't want to mess with data types. Let's do just string for now. And when we are actually using it as an entity, that's when we are going to convert it into the actual data type that we need. Okay, so that's basically the whole processing that's going to happen. It's going to take from this match input to our core match model, which is what our application is going to use, right? I want to have this separation because the input will be dependent on what the CSV file is, but we don't want our entity class to be dependent on what was mentioned in the CSV or the way the data is structured in the CSV. We have the separation. Let us handle the way the input data comes in with match input, but then our match entity is going to be exactly the way we want it, right? And the whole transformation step here is going to be converting from match input to our match. Okay, so I'm now going to create getters and setters, right? Generate getters and setters. I want it for all of them. Okay, and now I have my match input. All right, so that is the next step in the guide. Okay, so we did this. We created the business class. Let's see what's next. Create an intermediate processor. The common paradigm in batch processing is to ingest data, transform it, and pipe it out somewhere else. Okay, so this is perfect for us, right? We're going to ingest the CSV file, transform it so that it fits our requirement of what the model should be. And then where do we write it? We write it to our embedded database. So this is the item processor, which implements item processor, person, I think it's the input type and the output type. And then there is a process method, which takes in input type and returns the output type. Okay, so I'm just going to copy this. This is a Control-C, Control-V programming, by the way. You should be good at it if you're a programmer. I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call this match data processor.java. Okay, and paste this. Let me actually paste the whole thing here. And hang on. Okay, I'm going to put this here. Okay, and now I'm going to take the package value, replace the copy-pasted thing with the package, and then the class name, replace the class name with this guy. And now I can get rid of these two lines. Okay. All right, so we have match data processor, which implements item processor, which we have imported from Spring Batch. Now, item processor takes in two types. One is the input type, and the other is the output type. So we know this is the match input. Okay, so this is the data that we are getting in our processor. And then what this type is the output type. It's basically what does this processor return. Okay, so this processor is going to have a process method, which is going to get called for each line in the CSV file. Okay, so each line is going to map to a match input like we already saw. And now the output is going to be whatever model we need. Okay, so I'm going to create a new file called, well, actually, let me create a new package called model. And inside this model package, I'm going to create match.java. Okay, so this is a class which is our ideal match data. Okay, now what we need to do in our processor is convert from this match input we get from the CSV file to this match data. Okay, now what do we need in this match data? Well, I'm going to basically copy this stuff here and then tweak it to kind of remove the things that we don't need and tweak the things that we do need, but it's not in an ideal situation. Okay, first of all, ID needs to be int, right? Or maybe long. Doesn't need to be string, okay? City is a string. Date needs to be a date. I'm going to call this local date, all right? If you've been using newer versions of Java, don't use Java util date, use java.time.localDate, the preferred date now. Okay, so this is string. I'm going to call this player of match, no underscores here, okay? Player of match. Okay, string venue, neutral venue, we don't need this. Team 1, team 2, okay? And then we have toss winner. Again, I'm going to use camel case for this, and then toss decision. We have the string winner. I'm going to call this match winner so that it's not confusing, okay? And then we have the result margin. Eliminator, we don't need. Method, I have no idea what that is. And then, yeah, this should do it. Now I'm going to create getters and setters for this. Implement getters and setters for all of them. Then done. Okay, so we have the match input, which is the input from the CSV. This is the match, which is what we need, and this is how we are going to save to our database. And now the match data processor is going to convert from the match input to the match data that we need. Okay, and then it is going to return. The process is going to take match input, and then it is going to return the match data. Okay, now what does it need to do? It basically needs to look at the values in this guy. I'm going to call this match input, right? It's going to take the values from this guy and create a new match, which is what we want, All right, so match equals new match. And it's going to populate this match with whatever we have in the input, and then it is going to return match. Okay, that's what this process does. And Spring Batch needs this process class. Okay, this is how you basically convert from the input to the output, and that's how we do it in Spring Batch, right? So we're gonna write this method, and we're gonna hook it in so that Spring Batch knows to run this for each record that it's processing. All right, so what do we need to do here? First of all, we need to copy the values that we know are going to be the same. Okay, so what are the values that we have over here? So we have ID. We need to copy over the ID. Okay, so I'm going to say match dot set ID match input dot get ID. Okay, kind of think of it as a copy constructor, except that we're tweaking things a little bit here. Okay, so city is going to be the same, match dot set city match input dot get city. All right, date is going to be a little different, match dot set date. Well, what do we need? We need a local date time dot parse of match input dot get date. Okay, what we get from match input is a string date, but what we need to save is a local datetime instance. So I'm basically parsing it over here and saving it over here. I think parse should be fine because the date format, well, actually, let's look at the date format here. No need to look up Excel now because we have the CSV file right here. So what's the date format look like? Okay, month/date/year. So it should be able to handle it automatically. Just parse should do. Why is it complaining? So I'm going to make this local date.parse and then import local date. Okay, and this one is long, so I'm going to have to tweak this as well. So I'm going to say long dot parse long of is going to be match input dot get ID. Okay, hopefully there are no formatting issues. If there are, then I guess we will know. Okay, so date is done. Player of the match is a simple copy. Match dot set player of match get player of match. All right, next venue. Neutral venue we don't need, so I'm going to skip that. Team 1 and Team 2, what I'm thinking here is to make the team that the first innings team to be Team 1 and the second innings team to be Team 2. I don't know if it's useful, but I want to do that. I feel like doing that now because it kind of allows me to track it, because right now the input data doesn't have that. Okay, so here's what each match has in the input data. It has the toss winner, like who won the toss and whether they decided to bat first or bowl or field first. So it's not direct. I can't look up like who played the first innings and who played the second innings directly. So I'm going to have to look at the toss winner and say if the toss winner decided to bat first, then the first innings is the toss winner. Otherwise, the first innings is the other team. Okay, so I want to resolve that by making sure that Team 1 is always the team that played the first innings and Team 2 is always the team that played the second innings. All right, so that's an opportunity for me to do that over here and kind of have that handle in the processing. I see there is an error here because of the missing class. I'm just going to add that here. That was a copy paste thing. Okay, so how do I do this? I'm not going to blindly copy Team 1 and Team 2 to this new thing. I'm going to reorder them based on the toss result. Okay, let me set two names here. First, first innings team and second innings team. All right, and the reason I'm doing this is set Team 1 and Team 2 depending on the innings order. All right. So I have two strings over here. What I need to do is figure out what the first team is, what the first innings team is, and what the second innings team is. So how do I do this? I'm going to first check what the toss decision is, right? So the match input has a toss decision. Okay, if the toss decision is bat, then first innings team is a toss winner, right? If the toss decision is field, the first innings team, the second innings team is a toss winner. Okay, let's do that. I'm going to say if bat dot equals toss decision. Okay, so the team that won the toss decided to bat, which means that the first innings team is match input dot toss winner. Where's the toss winner? Here it is. Okay. Else, second innings team is match input get toss winner. Okay. Now we're gonna have to do the other one for both. Okay. So now the second innings team is going to be either team 1 or team 2, depending on who won the toss. Okay, so I'm going to do match input get toss winner if that's equal to team 1. Okay, if the team 1 won the toss, then the second innings team is match input dot get team 2. Okay. Else it is match input dot get team 1. Okay, is this making sense? I'm gonna put this into a new line so that it becomes easier to read. We know we have limitations in the data, all right? Limitations in the format of the data. We know who won the toss, and we know what they picked, right? Whether they picked to bat or to bowl, all right? And now we have two strings, the first innings team and the second innings team. I want to populate that with team 1 or team 2. So what I do is I first check if the team who won the toss decided to bat first. If they decided to bat first, well, the first innings team is the team who won the toss, right? Simple. Otherwise, the second innings team is the team who won the toss. Okay, now the team that won the toss decided to bat, and the first innings team is the toss winner, which means the second innings team is the other team. So what I do is I see, okay, is the toss winner team 1? Well, in that case, second innings team is going to be team 2. Is the toss winner not equal to team 1? Well, in that case, the second innings team is team 1 because the toss winner decided to bat, right? So this one is going to be the equivalent of this guy. Okay, and this is going to be first innings team. Is the toss winner team 1? Well, in that case, first innings team is team 2. Otherwise, it is team 1. Okay, basically the other team, which is what this is doing. So now what I have here is I have two strings, first innings team and second innings team. Now what I can do is I can set the right order in the match object, not the match input, the match object, which is going to go to the database, right? Team 1 is always going to be the first innings team, and team 2 is always going to be the second innings team. I'm thinking if I should rename that from team 1, team 2 to be first innings and second innings, because it now has this implicit meaning. I'm going to leave it as team 1 and team 2 for now. Match.set team 1 to be first innings team, team 2 to be second innings team, right? Now we fix the order. We know exactly what that is, and we know who the first innings and second innings is without having to kind of process this when we are serving the API. All right, very good. Next, we're going to put the other stuff into the match object. Put this over here. All right, so we have, actually let me get match over here because this is what we are populating. Okay, so we did venue, team 1, team 2. Next, we're gonna do the toss winner and toss decision. This should be straightforward. toss winner to be match input dot get toss winner, and then get toss decision, and then the result also should be straightforward copy. Get result margin. Finally, the umpires. You cannot forget the umpires. Match.set umpire 1. And umpire 2. There's umpire 2. And then we finally return the match instance. Okay? So just to recap, what have we done here so far? We have created a Spring Boot project with Spring Batch, right? Spring Batch needs to know what is the work that it needs to do, okay? We have to define that. But right now what we have done is we have defined this process method, which basically takes one entry, right? It's going to run this multiple times. It's going to take one entry and like, okay, I know how to process one entry. Now, how does it do it? We created one class called match input, which matches the input that we have from the CSV file. And we wrote another class, which is match, which is going to be the output, which is going to go to the database. And we wrote a process method, which knows how to process one entry from the input to the final match class. Okay, so we have this ready to go. Now we need to tell Spring Boot to execute it, the Spring Batch to execute it.